Greetings! Welcome to Nina's World. This podcast provides a short respite from the trials and tribulations of everyday life. We're going to step back in time to the 1950s and 60s. And now, our story. Nina's winter break. Nina still felt a low current of excitement when she gazed at the Christmas tree with its shimmering, colorful lights, and when she reflected on the events before and on Christmas Day. But she was also feeling a little sad, and she didn't understand how she could be feeling both emotions at once. The octave of Christmas was almost over and wouldn't be back for a year. It seemed like a long time to be away from something she loved. Another sign of the end were the needles as they began falling from the tree, despite the water added to the stand that held it upright. And it would have stayed upright if you didn't count Sarah's cat's efforts to wrestle with the branches, knock ornaments to the ground, and chase them across the floor. Nina's mom calling, "Sarah, come get your cat or else." Nina's mom placed an old bedsheet on the floor beneath the tree to capture what needles she could before the tree was moved to the curb. But not the tree, the train set, or the nativity scene would be removed before the Epiphany, the holiday celebrating the arrival of the three kings or magi who followed the star to Bethlehem. They brought gifts to the child Jesus, who gave us the greatest gift of all. Thus, the next celebration would be New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, a sort of 2-for-1 holiday, and a 3-for-1 holiday for Dorothy, whose birthday was the last day of the year. Still in all, it was the activities during the days between Christmas and returning to school that Nina and her siblings enjoyed. They played the new board games Santa had brought, and then they would pick up the next day after having played as long as they could into the night, beginning where they had left off. They took walks to Horace Park, just talking about a whole lot of nothing, or being quiet to listen to the sounds of nature. And then, happy day, it started to snow, and snow, and snow from late afternoon into the night, and didn't get tired of covering their neighborhood until the last flake had fallen from the sky. How many inches? Well, that's a matter of where Nina looked and where the wind had decided each flake should land. Outside the kitchen window, the side yard, was a beautiful white tablecloth etched with pine trees. Opening the front door, the path to the road would have come up to Nina's waist. Well, maybe not that high. Nina's street didn't get much traffic, so it was, at least before the first early cars in the morning, a billowing sea of snow foam now at rest. Nina's mom made a large pot of oatmeal with a dash of cinnamon. Nina liked a sprinkle of brown sugar and a splash of warm milk on her portion. Her brothers ate quickly because they wanted to make money shoveling neighbors' walkways, but none of that would happen until they shoveled their own entryway and driveway and cleared the snow off the station wagon for their dad. And of course, they were told to shovel the zinc sidewalk as a courtesy before knocking on other people's doors and negotiating deals. That was the last they saw of Paul and Martin until just before dinner. The snow in the side yard was actually too deep for Dorothy, Martha, and Nina to play, but that didn't stop them from pulling on boots with buckle clasps and whatever hats and gloves they could quickly find. It was like walking through a waist-high ocean. The once grassy area in front of the house was now snow-laden. The snowballs they made were nothing more than puffs without weight and dusted to the ground. Nina's mom opened the door, handed the girls a broom, and told them to sweep away the snow that their game placed on the path that Paul and Martin had already cleared. She scolded them slightly, warning that if it turns to ice, someone could slip and fall and break an arm. Ah, she was so optimistic. They did as they were told. After lunch, Nina's older sisters, Rosa, Teresa, and Sarah, decided that the snow was perfect for sledding, and since the wind had stopped, it didn't seem cold outside. Dorothy, Nina, and Martha wanted to go with their older sisters, so they began jamming their feet again into boots, sometimes too tight or too loose, in which they stuffed socks. The Finch boys from across the street joined them as they trekked down the road with its frozen ruts from the few cars that now had made it through the snow. It was a ways down the dirt road to Mole Hill, next to Father Duffy's small cottage. A retired priest, Father Duffy lived on the edge of the convent property, said Mass for the nuns each morning, and came to dinner at Nita's house on Sundays, when Nita's mom made spaghetti and meatballs. Sometimes he brought his puppy, Smokey, but that's a story for another day. The sisters joined other sledders already gliding and sliding and crashing into the bales of straw that the nuns' handyman had placed at the base of the hill to prevent sledders from going into the street. They trudged up the side path to the top of the hill, waited their turn, and then piled onto the first sled with the oldest sibling set to steer. One and then another younger sisters got on top. Another sister pushed as they started to go down the hill. They only had 2 sleds and a bunch of kids piled on each, but they didn't care. It was sheer exhilaration until the youngest sister on top fell off and rolled to the side, sliding this way and that, while the other 2 were able to hold on for all the marbles, finally stopped by the bales of straw at the bottom of the hill. Ears numb, fingers without feeling, noses running like the Gianttown flood, they returned to the top, over and over, until the sun sprouted pink and purple streamers across the late afternoon sky. They didn't know how long they had been sledding, but once they stopped, they felt the agony of sore muscles, their empty stomachs grumbling, and made the decision to head home. On they walked, pulling the sleds, glad to pass Horace Park, going under the railroad bridge and arriving home. By contrast, the house felt so warm it was almost painful. They removed their boots, placed now soggy socks and gloves on radiators, where they hissed and steamed and filled the air with an acrid odor. They were full of chatter as they rubbed their hands together and then pressed them to their faces. They pulled on pajamas and dry socks to warm up. Paul and Martin were already home and bragged about the money they had made shoveling snow. Their mom said she would hold the coins and bills and divvy it out to them as needed. The smell of beef stew on the stove made the girls hungrier, and their mom said they could make some peanut butter crackers to help tide them over for dinner. As they ate a few crackers and gulped short glasses of milk, all Nina and her siblings could do was talk about how they had the best snow day ever, with some of her sisters adding details that might have been slightly exaggerated. Paul had given Nina a notebook for Christmas. He told her to write ideas about stories, even if she waited to write the whole story later. Nina used a worn-down crayon to write ideas about Christmas. After so many activities, all she really wanted to do was read a book or read aloud to her younger sisters. Her mom and older sisters had read to her, and now, although not very accomplished, Nina would read familiar nursery rhymes and poems to Elizabeth and Bridget if they could sit still long enough. How she loved to read. One little sister on each side, a blanket on their laps, all cozy. They pointed to pictures, asked questions, and occasionally nodded off, just like Nina used to do and sometimes still did. At first, the Christmas vacation seemed endless, but as the days passed, Nina missed going to school, being with her friends, and her teacher, Mrs. Wagner, who had talked about people's habits of making New Year's resolutions. That was a fancy word for promises to themselves about being better in some way in the new year. Nina didn't quite understand, so she talked to her older sisters about reservations. They looked puzzled. You know, people, they make New Year's reservations, promises. They laughed. You mean resolutions? Yes, yes. The new year is often a time to do that. Maybe someone wants to stop doing something or start doing something. Nina, do you want to make a New Year's resolution? Nina wasn't sure, but would give it some thought and put her ideas in her new notebook. Suddenly it was New Year's Eve. Instead of regular dinner, Nina's parents created a party slightly later in the evening. The children were eager to enjoy sandwiches, choosing a snowflake or plain roll, and adding their choice of ham, Lebanon bologna, and one of two kinds of cheese. They had small pickles, green olives with some red stuff stuck in them, and black olives with holes that Nina and her sisters put on their fingers like fancy nail polish and ate one by one. On their plates, the girls could put celery, potato salad, skinny pretzels, and potato chips. They had a choice of soda, black cherry, cream, orange, or grape. After all, this was a special night. When the meal was over, they cleaned up and pushed the table against the wall. There was dancing like on bandstand, thanks to their older sister's records, and a lot of laughter. Soon it was difficult to stay awake, and Nina was beginning to feel cranky. But at midnight, everyone donned their gay apparel, went outside, made noise by banging pots with wooden spoons, and shouting Happy New Year to the birds and squirrels and neighbors. Nina gazed to the sky. The moon was as bright as 100-watt bulb. There were some stars, and then, was it fireworks from a neighbor? Or a comet racing across the sky, perhaps pointing in the direction of the new year? Nina suddenly decided. Her resolution would be to try to be kinder in the new year, just like that man in the Bible story who helped the stranger, just like Jesus said, to love God and your neighbor. Nina would try to be kinder. Nina would follow the light. The end. Thank you for visiting with us today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and share it with everyone you know. Return next week for another story from Nina's World. This story was written and read by Christine McKee, with gratitude to Dr. Ethel Ratkin of Bucks County Community College for editorial consultation and encouragement. Additional heartfelt support from family, friends, and members of my writing groups. Technical support was provided by Mr. Dan Tarrant of Personally Catholic. Sound engineering by Mr. Andrew Kimlock of AK Productions. May you embrace peace in your heart, in your home, and in your world.